Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back for this first, well, basically after the introductory presentation and the introductory panel on climate change and education, kind of in a general way. Now, we are following up with a first session on how to transform teachers to become climate change agents. And I think that very much is about what we also discussed in the previous session, and it very much also a link to what we will be doing tomorrow when we will be talking also about green schools, for examples, but also about resilience and how you can be more like the whole school approach. And also we will end tomorrow with the youth, with how to integrate youth within all what we're doing here today, because maybe one of the things that we don't see a lot here is young people, the ones that it's all about. We had a couple of educators. There are a couple of people that are educators in the audience. So that's great because it also concerns you, and more so this one, because this is about transforming teachers into climate change agents. It's kind of transforming this transformative way that Daniel Tilbury already talked about. Now, as you can see, you see the participants, the people that will be speaking, speaking here. We will start with a more global idea like, okay, but how do we view the position of teachers? How do they want to integrate climate change in their curriculum? Are they motivated? Are they confident about that? We will start with that, and then moving to a teacher herself in Senegal. She will be on screen. She will be with us, and then having a look at all the things, how she can be supported in order to be able to kind of really do something, start moving her curriculum, her approach in terms of climate change and education. But before we start, I would like to ask every one of you, again, the menti.com with the code 52270089, and a first question on teaching on climate change. If I'd ask you the question, teaching on climate change, how motivated do you think teachers are? And how confident do you think teachers are? So first, Ellen, may I have the Mentimeter on the screen? Yes. So here we see how confident and how motivated teachers are. So very much, well, the blue line here is kind of the spread. So here you see that no one thinks the rose, the pink thing here, that no one thinks that, at least not many of you, think that teachers are very confident. They're not confident at all, but they are more or less motivated, because you see here the bubs. So that's how you, and I will leave it open still. And in the meantime, I think it's time to introduce Lainey Keeper. Lainey Keeper is next to me. She is one of those people that are actually in Brussels, because you are in Brussels, you live in Brussels. Many other people that we will hear today will be 3 people from Senegal, 1 from South Africa, and then we will end also with someone also from here in Brussels. So we'll have basically a mix of 2. Lainey, you are from the Global Union of Teachers. You have done research on that. At least you know quite a lot on where teachers do stand in terms of climate change, where they do stand in terms of how confident they are to integrate that in their programs. So give us a bit of that background. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is the microphone on? Yeah, there it goes. Perfect. Good afternoon. Thank you so much to Educate for inviting Education International into this space. And of course, thank you to the interpreters for facilitating our collective dialogue that we're engaging in. As was mentioned, I'm Lainey Kepper. I'm a research policy and advocacy coordinator at Education International at the Secretariat here in Brussels. And before joining EI, I actually was a classroom teacher for 7 years, teaching civics and history. So I'm all about the combined space of student and teacher civic action. And if you are not familiar with Education International, we're the Global Union Federation of Teachers and Education Support Personnel. Globally, we represent 383 member organizations, which is 32 million teachers and education support personnel, over 178 countries and territories. Now, across the globe, our members face a variety of challenges, but one unifying challenge that they face is that no matter where they're joining from, the climate crisis is at their doorstep, whether that doorstep means they have no water or the water is overflowing. They are experiencing it. And we also know, has been acknowledged in previous sessions today, that not everyone is experiencing this crisis in the same way, particularly for girls and women, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, people from marginalized and vulnerable backgrounds are bearing the brunt of this. And when we think about the ways that the climate crisis is impacting education, we mentioned, that we see schools being destroyed. In Pakistan, the early estimates from their flooding was that there were 26,000 schools that were wiped out. And then in addition, 7,000 schools were turned into those community spaces, those emergency shelters. But what we also see happening is when a crisis like this happens, teachers are also having economic insecurity from their income. Their job is becoming insecure as well. They are losing their right to work in a safe condition as well. So the crisis is impacting education in a variety of different ways. Now, the good news that I can share with you, if my slide shares, and speaking on our question that we had on the Mentimeter, is you were right on the nose with what EI's research has revealed here, is that around the world, teachers are motivated to bring climate change education into their classrooms. Last year, EI and UNESCO conducted a survey of over 60,000 teachers from around the world. And what we found is that 93% of them believe that climate change education should be in their classrooms. However, what we are seeing is that 40% felt comfortable teaching the topic. And what we know from research is that you tend to not really teach about what you're not comfortable teaching, right? The logic is there. And what this meant was that they were not familiar with appropriate pedagogies, feeling they had the appropriate resources, the knowledge and skill set. In addition, they also were feeling that they were not well informed in how to approach the climate crisis while also approaching the social emotional results that they see in their classrooms. As we know, around the world, students are experiencing more anxiety and depression and mental health challenges when they think about the climate crisis. So also, how do you handle that in a classroom? And one thing that was really interesting in this research is we often see the younger generations taking to the streets, waving the climate justice banner. But what we also saw in this research is that this is an intergenerational topic teachers would like to teach. So the more experience a teacher had, the more willing and interested they were to teach about the topic, meaning that they were also an older person. So it isn't just young teachers interested, it is truly all ages. And some of the barriers that this research demonstrated is that teachers feel that the curriculum they are required to cover that might be on a standardized test, how do they weave in climate change into that, right? And that made me really think about what Daniela was saying about disrupting. How do we fundamentally change what the education system might be teaching so that climate change isn't something we add in, but is a core piece. Teachers also felt that students weren't necessarily given as much voice as well. And even though these barriers continue, what we know is that governments around the world are continuing to solidify these barriers. In another piece of research that was done last year and was revealed at COP26 in Glasgow was EI's Climate Change Education Ambition Report Card. And so what this research did was it looked at governments' nationally determined contributions, also known as their NDCs, which are the targets or promises governments set under the Paris Agreement of how they will lower their country's carbon emissions. And so what we looked at was how are governments including climate change education in those NDCs. And there's four findings I just would like to point out to you. The first is in an analysis of 133 of these NDCs, we found that governments, shockingly, maybe not shockingly, are not including climate change education as a result, as a method to reduce their country's carbon emissions. We saw only 40 out of 133, which for the mathematicians, that's less than a third, included climate change education as an avenue to reduce their carbon emissions. We saw that with regards to professional development and training, only 12 NDCs included this. Only 11 NDCs even mention the word teachers, but none of those mention teachers or their unions as a stakeholder to do this. So we see a disconnect. We see, yes, 40 did mention climate change education, but there's a gap in who would likely be charged with facilitating this education, right? And lastly, and importantly, what we also saw is that the countries who are most responsible for the climate crisis, who are the largest carbon emitters, were less likely to include quality climate change education in their results, and that the countries who are the most vulnerable were more likely to include it, such as the Republic of Marshall Islands and Vanuatu had strong positions there. And this is research that EI is continuously doing. With COP27 coming up in a few weeks in Egypt, we will be launching a newer refresh because the NDCs are something that are continually developed. And all of our research is online and translated into a variety of languages for you. So I've said the phrase, quality climate change education. So what does that mean for the teaching profession for EI? Last year, EI launched a Teach for the Planet campaign where we set out to define what do we mean by quality climate change education. So we launched a manifesto, which has been signed by our members all over the world, so that when we're advocating with governments, when we're coming to the table with governments in social dialogue, we have an understanding of what we mean. So for us, quality climate change education is an education that allows every student around the world to leave school climate literate, equipped with skills and knowledge needed to tackle climate change, to adapt to uncertainties, to take part in building a more sustainable future that is relevant to their context, to participate in a green, just transition, and imagining a future that they would like to see. It means that we are teaching a curriculum that is gender responsive, that is intersectional across all levels of education and subjects. It's not just a subject taught in the secondary biology classroom, but it's across the span of education. And it receives as much importance as reading, writing, and arithmetic. It means that it's a curriculum with a multicultural vision that integrates both Western science and Indigenous knowledge, because research shows that when both are working together in tandem and it's a localized solution, it's more likely to stick in the community and be a sustainable policy that will work. And it also means that we're engaging our students in civic engagement, in civic action, that they are able to go into their communities and transform the communities with what they would like to see. But thinking of what Daniela was saying earlier, it's going beyond, if it goes, come on, you can do it. Yeah, it's going beyond curriculum. So in our campaign, we are also calling for a variety of different changes that need to be made in our system to enable teachers to be able to do this. Because of course, teachers are willing to transform education, but the conditions must be given to them to be able to do this. So what are the system level changes that teachers and education support personnel would need to be able to facilitate this change. Of course, professional development, right? You can't teach what you don't know about. And that would be professional development that's continuous. It's in the pre-service. It's also ongoing. It's development that's created with teachers, that's accessible, that's not on their holiday period, that is really meaningful for them. And it's giving teachers the quality resources that they need, whether that's developing a garden in the school, whether that's a new curriculum, whether that's whatever that teacher might need, but giving them the resources to be able to do that. It's also being sure that professional autonomy and academic freedom are protected, that a teacher as a worker, their labor rights are also being protected, that when a teacher teaches truths about the climate crisis we are in, that they're not facing repercussions for that, especially in systems where climate denialism still is ongoing and exists. And that includes being able to teach our students about media literacy, right, and misinformation and disinformation. It's being sure that our institutions are safe, they're climate resilient, they're sustainable. And it means that teachers, as we are transitioning to a green economy, as we're engaging in this just transition, teachers have a seat at that table to discuss what the sector would need to look like to be able to be a part of this vision, so that climate change education isn't something just that's given to teachers and they implement it, but it's really a whole of society, a whole of school approach. And that there was a comment in the beginning that we need to escape the silos. And that's also something that EI fundamentally agrees with. We cannot deny that teaching is a profession that's highly feminized in the majority of systems around the world. So we cannot escape the intersections of gender inequity and the climate crisis. And how, and sometimes in the different crises and challenges that we face, the problems and the solutions often intersect. So there's an example that's from a study it's almost a decade old now, but I love it. It's from 2013, and it analyzed how the links between girls' education and disaster risk reduction. And it found that if 70% of women aged 20 through 39 received at least a lower secondary education, disaster-related deaths in 130 countries could reduce by 60% by 2050. Right. So when we think about what it could mean to really break down silos between our justice movements, that is a really powerful impact we could have. And the last point, which is key, is that without government's proper, sustained investments in their public education systems, all of these hopes of things we would like to see are empty dreams. We need to fully fund public education so that any type of transformation can be realized and also be sustained. So teachers are more than willing and ready to come to the table and be a part of this disruption, this transformation of education. But we have to really think about what are the system changes we would like to see, and how can each of us in the different sectors we work in feed into seeing that change come true. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lainey. Now, a question here that I have, which we kind of addressed a bit during the panel session, but maybe not that much yet. Educators, they are motivated, but they kind of lack the confidence to do it. So there's lots of ways to do it. But is it their role to do something about climate change? What is specifically their role in that whole climate change? Because this is kind of a societal challenge that we're facing. So what is their specific role? Is that also something they have an idea about?
Well, one thing that I always like to consider is, if we look at our current situation that we find ourselves in, what we often see is that teachers are left out of the discussions already being made. So what would it look like if we transformed it and we brought them in? They would be willing to be able to do that. Because if part of the problem, if our current status quo is that they're left out, a solution is to bring them in. Yeah. Because teachers know, it's their schools, it's their place of work that are being destroyed. It's their jobs that are being threatened. So they're there.
What is for you a concrete example of bringing them in? How would you Do you have an example on top of mind that you say, this is how we can bring them in a good way in that whole system that needs to change?
There's a variety of things. One thing I always think is with curriculum development, a lot of times it's sometimes, at least in my, I can speak to my own teaching experience that I had in the United States. Sometimes a curriculum is given to a school and it is therefore what you implement. And maybe it is not necessarily developed by a classroom teacher or someone who has been in the system, and then they were removed from the system for 20 years and now they're teaching it. But I think if we were to develop the curriculum from the beginning, there would already be that buy-in from teachers that they would be able to implement it.
Do you know places where they do that?
Off the top of my head, I cannot think of one.
Good, I'll let you think of one. And in the meantime, I have a Mentimeter question, because we will have a teacher, at least someone who has been a teacher, that we want to put central in this session, because it's about teachers, about them becoming kind of change agents, transforming them. So I'm curious to know, how can teachers be supported to teach about climate change, or at least to be this transformative person? So how can teachers be supported to teach about climate change? Comment les enseignants peuvent-ils être appuyés pour éduquer le changement climatique et peut-être même mieux encore devenir ces...
So how is it possible for teachers to become these climate change agents, and how is it possible for them to become a vehicle for this type of change within society, with a view to make it possible for people to tackle this climate change issue?
Great platforms and networks like the Teach Up 2030. Do you know that one?
No, Teach Up 2030.
Okay. No, you're not familiar with. Maybe we'll get to that later. I'm not familiar with it either, but that might come. Receive training on climate change with tools adapted for continuous development, including the topic and teacher training, climate issues integrated in official curricula. I see a lot of integration. Let's integrate teachers in climate change, and let's integrate climate change in teaching. That's what I see here. Well, do you see other things? Do you kind of relate to that?
I'm seeing
in the microphone, please. In the microphone, please.
Apologies. Hybrid spaces, right? We're all getting unused to the hybrid space now. What's catching my eye is challenging them into disruptive action. And it is a matter for all teachers.
Why is that one? Why do you see that one?
Because I believe there's a real potential for synergy with this, with climate justice. I know Daniela said that it's often a gateway to other issues and other challenges that we face. And I think there is a real reason why it is students who are leading this movement. And I think if students in tandem with their teachers are able to work in this space, there's really collective power and collective learning happening in there.
Are you within Education International also focusing on such an approach?
So what we always focus on at Education International is where can space for social dialogue exist between the unions and their governments, and spaces for this, and then also ensure that having their collective right to organize is always protected, as well. If they do engage in demonstrations, if they are teaching climate change and teaching the truth, that they aren't receiving repercussions for this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leni Keeper from Education International. Yes. Et je vais maintenant parler en français parce que nous avons...
And now I switch to French, if you don't mind, because we have several online speakers who have just joined us. And we have, amongst others, if I'm not mistaken, a teacher, Ngose Fall. Well, good afternoon, Ngose. Good morning or good afternoon, Mrs. Fall. Can you hear us, Mrs. Fall? Ngose, can you hear us? Good afternoon. Can you hear us, Ngose? Oh, apparently, Ngose, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Apparently, well, there is a sound problem. Hello. Yes. Good afternoon. Great, we can hear you. That's wonderful. Yes, we hear you loud and clear indeed. So as a teacher, because you have been a teacher, or you were a teacher, but now you're an inspector in the field of education in Senegal, if I'm not mistaken. But who are you? Could you briefly introduce yourself? Well, good morning, good afternoon. I'm Ngose Fall. I was a life science teacher in Senegal, but for the time being, I'm an inspector in the education sector at the Academy of TS, and I'm also in charge of the training of teachers. Well, do you also consider that the teachers you meet are highly motivated indeed? They really want to educate about climate change. Is it also something you did identify? Yes, indeed. I'm fully aware of that. And I had the opportunity on top of that to take part in different environmental education programs. And I've seen the commitment of teachers and students. And they've decided to become genuine stakeholders and actors in the field of climate change. So right from the start, what you told us is that you do work in cooperation with students. Yes, you're right. All the things we do scale up within Senegal are done in cooperation with students. It is a student-centered approach, whether we talk about activities in school, outside of school, whether we talk about environmental education or things of the kind, we always do that in cooperation with students. And what was the most amazing point related to the central role given to students? Well, I was quite amazed to see that when we are in a classroom, sometimes students are quite good, but when we get outside of school, when we do carry out environmental education, each and every one of them is committed, is engaged. They all try to answer questions because we are in the open air, we are in the nature, and for them it is a good opportunity to get really involved and engaged. So we need to get out of schools. That's what you are telling us. We need to get out of the walls of the school with a view to invite students and pupils to get into the nature. So do you believe it is still interesting anyway to remain within classrooms, within the buildings? Yes, of course. Some activities might take place inside the classroom, but if we want to encourage their participation, if we want to invite students to participate, it is good to have a mix of the two things, you know, within the school, but also outside the school. But really, when they're outside the school, when they're hands-on, you know, some activities, or when they do take part in hands-on activities, they are much more committed. Well, you were involved in life and earth sciences, if I'm not mistaken. You were a teacher in this type of subject. What is for you the added value of getting outside of school? Well, what we teach them in school is climatology, the theory. We talk about temperature, we talk about weather conditions and things like that. But people do not have an opportunity to use all the instruments and tools. And you will see that in my presentation. What is interesting for them is to have a kind of, is to use weather forecast tools and to see how do things to operate. They act as meteorologists, you know. When we teach them how to plant seeds, well, it's always better, you know, to have an opportunity to go to the garden outside of the school and to plant seeds and to see how things do work and to have an opportunity, you know, to see the seeds growing and things like that. Actually, you did refer to your presentation, and I believe it would be good to jump into your presentation right now so that you will have further opportunities to describe what you have just told us. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a picture or a movie about a garden or a school garden or something like that. And that's something you did with the support of the OIF Institute, but we'll have an opportunity to come back on that with other guest speakers, because it does indicate that it is really important to teach all that in a different way. But now the floor is yours, Mrs. For your presentation. Yes, so I'm going to jump into my presentation, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference, because and I would like to thank all those who supported us with a view to carry out those activities. So what about our key objective, i.e. to transform teachers and students into genuine climate change agents? And in Senegal, we decided to promote two different approaches with a view to face climate change. The very first strategy is to teach climatology in the classroom, so to how to deal with climate data. And then we had an inclusive green project, as we decided to call it. It is a reforestation program which is meant to promote CO2 sequestration, and it was done in cooperation with OIF, as mentioned on my slide. What about our main and key achievements? Since we started, we trained 281 teachers in physical premises on a face-to-face basis, and 67 on a virtual basis, and they were all trained in the field of climatology and climate change. 40 teachers have been trained to become environmental education trainers, and they were also involved in reforestation techniques. And thanks to the multiplication of training sessions, we have managed to reach 401 teachers, 11,313 teachers, and 22 schools in the TS community have been involved in this reforestation program, as well as in the creation of a garden, a vegetable garden. And what is also important from a psychological point of view is that we did realize that people were much more aware of the situation thanks to all these activities. And it was true not only for teachers, but also for students and pupils. So what about data compilation? So it is a program which started 5 years ago and which is still underway. So we had an opportunity to compile data through this particular program. And here we decided to get out of the school. So here we decided to go into suburbs of the city, and we had the opportunity to use a thermometer to measure the rain level. And we have the opportunity to collect data, so students can get there to this special hub with a view to get all the data. And here we have another group of students measuring the temperature in the soil, as you can see. So the students, have an opportunity to take care of all that in their environment. They have the opportunity to compile the data. When we have compiled all the data, what do we do? Well, then they go to the classroom. So that's the part which takes place within the school. And we go to the IT room and all the measures which were collected, as you saw on the previous slide, well, everything is entered into an Excel sheet with the day, the time at which the measures were taken, the names of the students who were involved. And we have this table and all the data. And thanks to the software, the students have the opportunity to design some curves. Here we have 3 curves for 2005, 2006, and to 2004, 5, and 6. And you can see the evolution of temperature over time. And here we can see that there is a change in terms of climate, a change from one day to another and from one year to another. And if we do manage to inform students about that, there might be a change regarding the climate approach. Otherwise, it would be kind of empty motto, to talk about climate change. Students might not become aware of that, but thanks to those tables, thanks to those measurements, students do become aware of the climate change and are decided and willing to be involved in designing solutions. So here we have another example of how data are implemented. In 2005, we had a lot of floods in the city of Dakar, the capital city. So we did use the data of our students with a view to see what could be our contribution to climate change. Here you can see the 5 winter months and compared to July, August, and September. So these are the rainy month. And students did realize that 2 months before there was no rain, and in July, during the last fortnight of July, the first fortnight of August, you can see a different graph. And that's the kind of thing we did not know or we had never experienced. And no rain in October. And the students decided to move a step forward and with a view to make a kind of analysis. And they did refer to the water cycle. So here we could see that some sites in Dakar were not flooded. And finally, we could see that the water would run down the hill, and these are the areas which have been flooded. So now it is important to determine whether or not land space use was to be blamed. And we could see that 2 things were involved: a change in the climate, but also a change in the way land was likely to be used. So the land use issue is really a problem, and we could determine which areas could be affected or impacted by the floods. So what else did we realize? Well, we did realize that in the lower part of the cities, there were many dwellings, while normally no dwellings had to be built over there because those areas might be flooded. And it did occur probably because at a certain period of time, there was no more rain and people decided to settle down over there. But now the situation has changed, and the students decided it would not be a good idea to make it possible for people to build their dwellings in that particular part of the city, which was likely to be flooded. What else? Instead of dwellings, the students decided to encourage people to promote farming activities with a view to have an impact on climate change. And it had a positive impact because the older people, our parents, and so on and so forth, were informed about that because the children told them, we should do this or that, and we should not do this because it's not good for the environment. So that's what we managed to do in terms of community education. And on the occasion of the Environment Day, we take advantage of a series of events with a view to invite the parents, the community, the leaders, the headmasters, and so on and so forth, with a view to raise awareness about climate change. And we drafted a manual about climate change as well. Well, that's for the first project.
Le deuxième projet soutenu par l'OIF maintenant, c'est pour lutter contre le changement climatique.
The second project, which is supported by AF, is about carbon sequestration. We do not produce a lot of carbon dioxide, but we support, we have the consequences of it all. So through this project supported by OIF, we could train teachers, students, and we could have gardens everywhere. This is an inclusive project because the path you can see here is done with visually impaired people. So there was a twinning between seeing people and visually impaired people, and visually impaired people could beneficiate from this project. Teachers and community parents are trained. We had a training with the teachers. You can see all the places where this green project is implemented. So we can now show part of the video to see very concretely what has been done. This training workshop, the increase of this well, this project has two objectives. First, to improve the framework of our schools. We want nice schools with flowers and woods in a nice framework, and teachers want to stay there. Second part of the project, which is even more important, it is an improvement of learning condition, and more specifically for sciences. We have a lack of equipment, and what we want here is to have the possibility to go directly to nature, to the orchard, and see what is happening. And when you talk about that in the school, in the classroom, it is much easier. For 2 days, there were capacity building for those teachers about environmental teaching. What we want is that in the longer term, Senegalese children can better like nature and the environment. When you like the environment, when you like trees, when you like them better, everything goes better. With the International Organization of French-speaking countries, 11 schools beneficiate. The criteria were the following. Having fenced school, because not all. Then you need to talk about water. We will have a garden, so we will need water. And technicians also thought about soil in order to have the best soils. Thank you very much. This is just part of the video, and the interpreter did what she could, but she didn't receive the video before, so could not prepare it. We use it in order to help teachers understanding. A first recommendation when it comes to educational policy is integrating the topic of climate change at all levels, because teachers are interested, children are interested. But the question is, when can you develop environmental education when it is not in the children's curricula? So in general, these projects happened out of the school time. You have to teach right and fair. You need to put training modules available to all teachers. You need also to train all stakeholders of the educational system. Let's not forget the community. The community is for the community. We are training everybody, the parents and the whole school. As we said before, we need to organize visits to sites that are affected by climate change, so that students will understand climate change. When it comes to the means, we need to have a discussion platform on climate change at the level of each country or each academy. You also need to support environmental educational projects like ours. For the case of Senegal, we have an inclusive project, and we also have the curriculum. Besides the knowledge that we have developed, there are also limiting factors. So with other approaches, we need to try and develop this project. You also need some motivation. You need to value training and the production of teachers and students. This topic has not been integrated in the curriculum. So that means that this is not being scored. It's not being evaluated. So you need to value what we are doing, either with competitions or with visits or certification of teachers as well, to teachers and to students. So you need also to find all needed strategy for making them sustainable, making those knowledge sustainable about climate change. It is good to have a curriculum, to have a support of OIF, for example, but at the end of the day, we all have to be mobilized when it comes to the sustainability of those knowledge. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you very much, Ngosefam. You showed that as a teacher, you can be an agent for transformation. What is the main support? What helped you the most? As we will be talking about ways of supporting teachers for this transformation. What helped me most is getting the scientific material, because in order to study climate change, we need science and we need
programme GLOBE, on m'a donné tous les instruments scientifiques pour étudier le climat.
Necessary to study the climate, thermometer, pluviometer, and so on. And the OIF support also, who allowed us to train a lot of teachers on climate change with a different project. We could study resilient species, those adapted to climate, what type of plant should be also favored, and so on in times of climate change. So you need material, physical material on the ground, and you also need equipment to know what you can plant, for example, which plants are resilient, for example, and you do need support with other students. So I imagine that you do not want to be the only one to do that. Thank you very much. I would like now to go around everything that's possible. So can we go to the National Ministry of Senegal with Mr. Dia and Ms. Françoise Daxelet, coordinator of IFADEM. Can you please tell us how you did it? Is Ablaye here as well? Yes. He is on another computer. Unfortunately, Ablaye's sound is not enough to be able to interpret properly. The quality is not sufficient at all. What about IFADEM? How do you support teachers? What could allow Ms. Gossefal to do it is obtaining the equipment, pedagogical equipment, but also the support. Who would like to react? Ablaye, Françoise? No, the interpreter is sorry, but she cannot interpret.
Notre collègue Madame Gossefal, qui est également du ministère, mais au niveau déconcentré. Et au Sénégal également, au niveau du ministère de l'Éducation nationale, depuis quelques années, nous nous sommes engagés à prendre en charge le développement durable, mais également le changement climatique, pour qu'il soit donc pérenne. Parce qu'on se dit que accompagner, oui, mais jusqu'à quand? Et c'est pourquoi nous, avec IFADEM, même également d'autres bailleurs, nous avons intégré dans les curricula pour la formation à l'élémentaire, qu'on appelle primaire, mais également le préscolaire. Donc, on n'est pas encore arrivé jusqu'au niveau Madame Ngossé, qui est donc au moyen secondaire, mais à l'élémentaire et au préscolaire, les curricula, mais également en termes d'accompagnement outil. Parce que tout à l'heure, j'ai vu la première table ronde, on parle de motivation. Maintenant, on se dit que pour motiver, il faut disposer des compétences. Il faut également avoir des outils, mais également un accompagnement dans un cadre vraiment structuré pour qu'au moins l'enseignant puisse être motivé. Parce que tant qu'on n'a pas cette compétence, tant qu'on n'a pas des outils, souvent c'est la peur. Est-ce que je vais y arriver? Est-ce que je peux y arriver? Mais du moment que l'État, donc, avec ses partenaires, notamment EPADEM, dont Mme Françoise y reviendra, nous a accompagnés à élaborer des guides avec des outils, avec même des tablettes à partir desquelles les enseignants, les enseignantes vraiment, ont pu donc développer. Et un exemple tout à l'heure vous sera montré par une dame qui est à l'Académie de Cassine au centre du pays, qui a donc pu transférer ce qu'elle a acquis dans les classes avec les élèves pour le faire concrètement sur le terrain avec ses propres moyens. Et c'est cela qui nous a fait plaisir et François va y revenir. Donc voilà brièvement campé ce que je voulais dire par rapport à l'intervention de Mme Ngossepal que je fais au passage.
Merci, merci bien. Françoise, par rapport à
Thank you, Françoise. The support you give in order to motivate teachers. It also goes via the Ministry of Education in Senegal. What is your role? What role do you play? Well, let's go right away in the details with the presentation. But globally, what was interesting is the sequence of presentation. It's always very interesting to hear Ms. Gossefal's presentation, because after such an experienced presentation, we will take a more institutional way. With the IFEDEM Senegal program, we adapted teachers' continuous training strategies, and we adapted them. Maybe we can start with a video. A video that could show some key items of this support in Senegal. Yes, we will start the video right now. So for a quality, inclusive and fair education for all. Pupils are happy, they are committed, they are excited, they want to do well, they want to learn and transfer and be able to transfer that at home. This training is a certificating training, and for Senegal, it is mainly about the use of digital equipment. Okay. So that was just a starter to show, in fact, what you've been doing, Françoise. Up to you. What would you like to say? Shall I start my presentation? Yes, please do. Oh, no, I'm mistaken. I'm sorry. I was about to forget. There was a question on the Mentimeter. What have you seen? What did you see in the video that can help you giving confidence to the teachers as climate change actors? Let's ask this question to our audience today. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do when it comes to teachers training? You can see people typing their answers. And of course, people online can also go to Mentimeter. Kits, having kits, physical equipment, like Ms. Gossefal said, having the actual equipment to do that is important. Give them tools and knowledge trust the teaching professionals, making it relevant to their content areas. Give them positive feedback. It is about knowledge, but also tools, connections, relationships, and also connections to be able to connect to the internet, for example, with online tools. Agency, acting really, and support by government at all levels. This is what we can hear from the audience here. Françoise, what do you think of all this? Indeed, it shows the holistic and systemic character of the topic. And it's while mutualizing approaches, entry points, support when it comes to equipment, pedagogical support, and so on, that will allow to turn teachers into actors of change for climate change. I think it's now the time for your presentation, I believe. Okay, so let's talk about the experience of Senegal in the FADEM while supporting teachers in climate actions. I wanted to show you some images that seemed quite relevant. IFADEM is the initiative for distance learning. It was started by OIF and others. It is developing actions in 16 French-speaking countries. It is supporting national education ministries in the participating countries. And notably in Senegal, we have the support of the National Ministry of Education. It is also a program which is carried by local communities, and APFE, which is the structure for which I work, is a technical and financial partner in 3 countries, among which Senegal since 2017, with the financial support of Belgian Development Cooperation.
So the very purpose of this program is to strengthen the education and training system and devices. So how are we in a position to do that? Well, by implementing national strategies in the field of ongoing training, not only for teachers, but also for support education personnel. And there is, of course, a kind of alignment at the level of the national education ministries throughout the different countries. I think that there is a system of joint building, joint implementation, which has been put in place, and it is quite flexible. All IFADEM programs are quite specific, but we always have a dimension devoted to innovation in all the programs we do implement. And it is likely to contribute to an fair and inclusive and quality education for all. Well, regarding IFADEM Senegal, you can see a series of key elements. IFADEM started in 2014 in Senegal. So we had, first of all, a pilot phase. and we had an opportunity to train 500 teachers. And you have to know that in Senegal, we have an hybrid training system. So we do have self-training, for example, via a training platform, but we also have an opportunity to have exchange amongst peers, either on a face-to-face basis or online. In 2017 and 2021, or between the two, you can see that we trained 1,456 teachers, more than 90% of success rate regarding the certification exam, and 4 regions impacted. Between 2022-2026, we would like to train 1,000 teachers and 5,000 headmasters, and we would therefore cover 7 different regions. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ablai Dia, our partners. Ablai Dia is going to explain what we do at the national level with a view to promote the commitment of teachers regarding climate actions. No, the sound is not good. There is not a good sound. For the interpreters, it is not enough, unfortunately. We do apologize for that, but you really need to invite a speaker to speak closer to the mic, because the sound is really too low. And with my voice, I do cover and cannot hear anything. I do apologize for that, but it's really impossible.
Au préscolaire. Et pour ce faire, nous avons élaboré des guides qui constituent le programme de formation. Au préscolaire, nous avons 3 sections, la petite section, la moyenne section et la grande section. La même chose a été répliquée au primaire avec un guide pour le CI et le CP, un deuxième guide qui se rapporte au C1 et au C2, et enfin un troisième guide qui se rapporte au CM1 et au CM2. Dans ces 6 guides pédagogiques qui est le programme, chaque fois, nous avons tenu à mettre en œuvre les thématiques relatives.
Once again, interpreters do apologize, but the quality of the sound is really too poor, which means that we are not in a position to translate anything from what the gentleman is telling you. We do apologize for that.
Conséquences mathématiques en termes d'inondation, de désertification, de sécheresse, etc. Vous voyez en bas cette dame avec les enfants derrière, parce qu'ils sont sachés de chez elle par les inondations. Mais également, il y a les eaux usées. Et nous avons beaucoup de villes où les eaux usées stagnent et causent beaucoup de maladies. Or, nous savons également dans les OED, le bien-être est inclus. Également, il y a les déchets que nous avons solides comme liquides qui nous envahissent et dont nous ne savons que faire. Donc, voilà donc les éléments que nous avons inclus dans les curricula pour les programmes de formation, aussi bien à l'élémentaire comme également au préscolaire. Également, il y a une seconde phase, c'est l'axe 2, où maintenant on dit formation. Parce qu'il faut que les enseignants et les élèves aient des connaissances, disposent également de compétences. Et pour ce faire, on met l'accent sur la formation, mais également la mise à disposition d'outils. Et le premier plan, c'est la formation initiale. Et dans cette dimension, nous avons mis 3 éléments. D'abord, un référentiel de formation des élèves maîtres à l'initiale, qui renforme beaucoup d'éléments également sur le développement durable, et notamment donc sur le changement de climat. Maintenant, pour le rendre opérationnel, nous avons élaboré des modules de formation. Également, ces modules, c'est vraiment la traduction dans les faits du référentiel. Et pour coordonner le tout, nous avons un livret illustré qui montre le processus par lequel l'enseignant peut amener avec ses élèves à mettre donc en œuvre le changement climatique, mais également les éléments du développement durable. Autre dimension, c'est la formation continue. Slide, oui. Donc, la formation initiale est terminée, on met pour corrélation dans un continuum la formation continue. Et c'est là également l'apport de l'IFADEM. L'IFADEM nous a permis d'élaborer 9 livrets, et vous voyez l'un avec Mme Gueye qui est en bandoulière. Le livret 2 s'intitule Éduquer au développement durable, pour installer des comportements responsables. Et dans ce livret, le demandeur donc a été traité sur beaucoup de dimensions. Mais on ne peut pas être là avec IFADEM. Donc, il y a donc 3 autres éléments qui sont venus s'ajouter. C'est les livrets. Le livret, donc, c'est des contenus, c'est des schémas, c'est des processus par lesquels l'enseignant peut passer pour donc mener son enseignement-apprentissage. Mais également, à chaque enseignant, IFADEM nous a permis de donner une tablette que vous voyez en bas, mais en plus, une connectivité. Chaque enseignant, là où il est, il a donc ces 3 outils. Il y en a 1456 tablettes de connectivité qui partout donc travaillent avec les élèves, mais même en groupe. Parce que également, ce qui est important, ils se faisaient par des bassins et par paire. Souvent même, ils vont au-delà de ce que nous, institutions, nous avons prévu. Et là également, c'est l'engouement qu'il fallait donc a permis de voir dans la formation. Et là, donc, c'est les enseignants. On se dit que si nous finissons avec la formation initiale, la formation continue des enseignants, il faudra qu'on soit très logique en mettant donc le plan sur les directeurs d'école et les directrices. Parce que ces personnes-là sont des interfaces entre l'école et la communauté, également les élèves. Et si ces personnes parviennent à mieux manager leur école en mettant l'accent sur le développement durable, qui est donc des questions qui interpellent carrément la société, on peut avoir donc espoir que la boucle est bien refermée. Merci. Maintenant, il fallait également, dans la phase 2022-2026, est revenu pour nous accompagner et nous avons élaboré 3 livrets exclusivement réservés aux pilotes, aux managers. Et il y a un des livrets intitulé Maîtriser les mécanismes de gestion durable de l'environnement des écoles, du partenariat, de la mobilisation communautaire. Et dans ce livret, il y a une séquence exclusivement réservée au changement climatique et développement durable. Et voilà comment on l'a intitulé accompagner une démarche intégrée de gestion durable de l'environnement. Et qu'est-ce qui est visé à travers cette séquence ou bien ce livret? C'est rendre le directeur capable de piloter une gestion durable de l'environnement de son école d'abord. Également d'engager son équipe dans la sauvegarde ou à la restauration de son environnement de travail. Et troisième pilier est très important, et la table ronde de ce matin l'avait montré, c'est impliquer les élèves et les partenaires dans le respect de l'environnement. Et vous voyez la photo de la gauche, c'est donc l'équipe de production. Vous voyez Françoise à côté, et Papi également de l'IFEF, également le consultant qui nous a accompagnés avec l'équipe Sénégal, des enseignants, vraiment qui ont élaboré ces livrets destinés donc aux directeurs d'école. Donc voilà, brièvement campé, ce que nous avons fait en termes de formation, en termes d'accompagnement, mais également en termes de ressources, outils disponibles pour que l'élève, l'enseignant, donc puisse mener à bien donc cette réforme intégrée pour le Sénégal. Donc je passe la parole à Mme Françoise pour nous parler des défis, et il y en a un, et des recommandations que nous avons formulées. Merci.
Alors, Françoise, je ne sais pas combien de... Merci beaucoup.
François, well, thank you so much, and thank you, Ablaye Dia. Thank you very much for your explanations about how you do support teachers. Well, thank you very much indeed for what you did share with us. You did refer to the relevant institutional framework. And Françoise, maybe to conclude, could you possibly highlight the takeaway messages for the audience, the most important messages maybe? Well, 2 messages indeed, 2 takeaway messages, which are part of the current challenges and difficulties we are facing, and bearing in mind the objectives to be fulfilled. Or maybe I would have 3 or 4 to mention actually, and not 2. Well, I'll try to be brief, but to make a bit more clear the issue of climate change, because we talk a lot about education and training to sustainable development, but the issue of climate change is probably a bit blurred right now, and we would like to make it a bit more clear. And we would like, secondly, to assess the impact of all the initiatives taken at the institutional level to develop more partnerships. Then the third bullet point, and fourth element, to have a more systematic approach regarding the maintenance, the repair and the recycling of electronic equipment. Because we talk about remote training, we do believe maybe that this might reduce the environmental impact, but we have a lot of waste and CO2 emissions which are produced by the digital tools we do use. And our objective, of course, is to reduce as much as possible this type of waste. And finally, we would like to create probably more jobs as it is something which might be positive. And the initiative is not only important, but what is behind the initiative and the follow-up of the initiative also matters, of course. So thanks to both of you for the support and the initiative you did scale up. Thank you so much indeed.
Now going to move on to teacher support. And I think Ngozi Fall also talked about it, like how can teachers support themselves? So we have from South Africa, we have Shanu Missa from the where do I have it? I have it here. Yeah, from Fundisa for Change in South Africa. Good. I think it's also afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, Shanu. How are you? We cannot hear you yet.
Okay, good afternoon. How are you all?
Yes, we're here. It's kind of getting yeah, well, kind of last. I hope the last more or less 20 minutes before we start. You have 10 minutes to kind of explain a bit what is the support you're giving from the South African perspective, but also a bit from the university perspective, because I know you're related to universities too. And what support are you giving to teachers? And Ngozi Fall talked about it and said, this is important. Now, how do you make that important? The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think what we're looking at, and I'm assuming I can continue with my presentation. I think the university support, so just to tell you a little bit of who I am, I'm actually, my name is Shana Mirza, and I come from a teaching background, but currently I'm based in the South African government. And one of the things we are involved in, my role in this is coordinating this program that is called Fundisa for Change, meaning teaching for change. And the program is actually a national professional learning community, which is made up of various stakeholders in South Africa. And it was established as a South African community of practice response towards enhancing and supporting transformative ESD and climate action through teacher education in the country. So the program is based on and came about due to many of the different policies that we have in the country relating to whether it's the school curriculum, whether it's relating to climate change response policy, or whether it's relating to the South African National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. Basically, it's looking at one of the key things that had emerged was that the foundations of climate change education and education for sustainable development, the foundations of that required greater strengthening as a country. And so as a result, multiple stakeholders, partners, it's a partnership between government, NGOs, civil societies, universities, parastatals, all coming together to try and have greater impact in terms of our our work in terms of the sector. So as a result, this program was born. And under this program, another aspect is linking to that we tried to develop a more intense understanding around climate change education. And so we also worked with other organizations like BVOB, Green Matter, and a project funded by the Flanders called Keep It Cool Climate Change Education. So basically, it's a number of different projects that focus on particular areas like green economy, climate change education, etc. So based on that, I'm just going to, and to date we've worked with, in the whole program, we've worked with more than 3,000 teachers across all the areas, regions in South Africa. And with regards to that, we've also, worked with subject advisors, who you may call curriculum advisors. We've also engaged with university lecturers. So the program has many aspects, and today I'm just going to focus onto this particular aspect linked to the, the different approaches we've utilized. And one of the frameworks that we are using is looking at what we've called a framework, quality teaching in sustainable schools. And the approach that we utilize is looking at know your subject or know your context, know your subject, improve your teaching practices, improve your assessment practices, and improve your school as kind of overarching framework. And linked to that is, it's kind of talking about how do we innovate? How do we innovate into our subjects? How do we innovate into our teaching practices? How are we innovating into our assessment practices? And then how do we innovate into, thinking about climate change and adaptation in terms of schools, learning, and all the different focuses. And at the same time, what we've looked at in particular is how do we strengthen and think about content knowledge? How do we look at teaching practices? How do we focus on assessment practices? And thinking about strengthening foundational knowledge linked to these topics, particularly around climate change. And we know that, climate change knowledge is contested and uncertain. What does that mean for teachers in schools? What does that mean for education officials who are supporting schools? And how do we progress knowledge? How do we move from one grade to the next grade? And then linked to that is also, in South Africa, we have a strong focus on reading and writing to learn, focusing on active learning and mathematical skills, creative and critical thinking, and then focusing into subject-specific pedagogies. And what would be meaningful for teachers in terms of their own subjects and the topic of climate change. And then thinking about how do we work with assessment practices that enable us to reach between school and community and bridge that gap between the school and community or schools in community. So it's linking to those concepts, and then a higher order questions for assessment and thinking about how that comes about and what opportunities does climate change and education for sustainable development or environmental learning, how does it enable these higher levels of thinking? So as a community of practice, and I'm here representing the entire community of practice that sits around this program, and we developed a number of different materials, which kind of creates a basic framework, looking in terms of how we are looking in terms of curriculum. So what it does is that it has a set of generic materials, which we call, that sets the big scene around climate change, sustainability, the SDGs. We have generic materials around methods and processes to support change-orientated learning. And then we have something specific around what we're calling active teaching and learning. So those are some of the generic materials, and then something around careers. And then we have subject-specific materials. So in South Africa, we have a lot of content. The environmental content is quite grounded in the curriculum. There is quite a lot around climate change already in the curriculum, but our research has shown that the gap actually exists in that there is quite a lot of climate change content there, but it's around from what conceptual framework do they come? And what we have noticed is that in terms of the concept of adaptation doesn't come through as strongly in the curriculum, whereas it tends to focus more in terms of mitigation. So there are these little nuances. So we developed these subject-specific pedagogies that are subject-specific materials that are phase-specific, subject-specific, and topic-specific. So for example, we would look at teaching climate change in natural sciences from grades 7 to 9, or teaching climate change in geography, grade 10 to 12. So it's quite specific. It's a phase-specific approach. And it is utilized through a framework whereby we work with kind of like a model of starting up training. And this training is generally offered in a partnership model between the universities, NGO partners, and government. Together, all of us come together into this training session with teachers, and we open up the dialogue and discussions around climate change. And so, and utilizing some of this materials, other materials, people can bring in other materials that are more relevant, that are more contextually appropriate for particular contexts. And then from there, it works through that process of, understanding the context, working together in a subject, and and then working around understanding what the current teaching practices are and what's the vision of where we want to get to, thinking about our assessment and how we work with assessment currently and what opportunities, and then thinking about in terms of whole school approaches. How do we then bring on board the whole school? How do we bring on board principals? How do we support learners with conversations? It's how do we design learning as a whole, and how do we engage the communities? And we approach it also with the idea of, at the heart of it all is the classroom and school innovations into communities. And we have come up with the concept of a change project. And in Africa, we have a program called Sustainability Starts with Teachers, which also looks at the concept of a change project, but we've evolved that to think about more of a curriculum activated change project. So very much grounding the curriculum and what it is, what are the possibilities. And all of this is then further, teachers then engage in professional learning communities where they would continue to with the discussions, planning learning together, and deliberating on the ways and approaches in which they could look at, designing and working with climate change. So,
you're almost out of time.
Okay. That went very fast, I must admit. But just to also say, then we work through this framework, and I just hear we place at the center also the idea of heritage knowledge and the role of heritage knowledge in terms of climate change, and very much, where we're coming from, and then moving into a framework of thinking about how we plan lessons together. And we draw on Anne Edwards and work with the idea of significant learning being, not just any type of learning, but climate change, ESD, etc., is requiring a different level of learning, and we work with the idea of significant learning. And okay, and then I come to my last slide, which hopefully, and all of this is university certified. It is and teachers get continuous professional development points for the courses that they come to. And just to explain that, we've worked with a lot of teachers, and as you can see, what are teachers actually valuing? One, teachers are actually valuing the engagements with universities and the deep dialogues that emerge. And we're seeing from all our research that this is leading to a very strong intrinsic level of motivation and the will to want to innovate. People are wanting to innovate. but it's about the system and how does the system allow people to innovate. And then it's about, the framework is used to focus also on teacher practices. I've explained that one already, so I won't go there. And then it's the PLCs and the work within the professional learning communities are seen as opportunities for teachers to engage with each other, to share their practices, provide emotional and professional support. And teachers are really valuing that element, but they also feel like there needs to be adequate resources to support that. And so we've developed what we call a digital library where teachers can access it. And we've developed like little modules that they could then use if they wanted to in their professional learning communities, just to help them, because that is what teachers are saying. And then teachers also valued the opportunity to work in a community of practice. And I think I already said good quality resources. So I think if I had to say what are the key messages in terms of recommendations, I think for us, it's leveraging the entire system. It's really thinking about that system of education and how that system of education can support teachers better. And then the other very quick one is around what is the conceptual framework that one could utilize in terms of thinking about climate change education? What is the conceptual framework? And having that very strongly grounded, I think, is one of the key recommendations. And then to also ensure that we also deal with, in some ways as a system, with the miscommunication around climate change that does happen in some cases, particularly in terms of media and others. So it's about how can we support teachers to navigate that space together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shanu. Shanu Maiza from all the way from South Africa, and this systems approach, putting everything, basically having a look at the whole, this kind of holistic approach. I think that also resonates, at least with what I heard Ngozi Fel saying, where she also used kind of other teachers in order to move herself forward into this using climate change in her curriculum, with her students. Thank you very much. Now, because it's already 5:30, so we will run a little bit later than we kind of expected. But there are many packed kind of presentations with lots and lots of interesting content. But we move to the last presentation by Asmita Rajaram from the VVOB with a project S-School, if I'm not mistaken. Let me have a look at my notes, which is more about a global perspective for teachers and how we can support them also, again, with this peer-to-peer learning, with this continuous learning that they're at. Asmita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruben. I see Letitia also has joined. But first, thank you, Educate, for the opportunity to talk to you today about something exciting that we've started at VVOB. Let me start off by introducing Letitia here. Letitia is an English teacher in South Africa who is very passionate about climate change, who wants to make space for this topic in her subject. And she has some ideas of how to do it, but she would really like to collaborate with other teachers to help her shape her idea a little bit more. So let's go to the other part of the world, where we have Mauro, who teaches Portuguese in a Brazilian school, and who is, like Letitia, very interested in the topic of climate change, and he wants to address it through his language teaching practice. So what if we had a way to connect Letitia and Mauro with each other and facilitate a collaboration towards this climate lesson plan? But wouldn't it be even greater if we could link even more like-minded teachers with each other and have them collaborate on this lesson plan? Or let's take it even further. What if we could connect hundreds and thousands of teachers across the globe, across subjects, and to really get a global exchange on climate education. And when I talk about climate education, I don't only talk about the technicality, greenhouse gases, earth warming, sea level rising, but also about things like resilience, adaptation, climate justice, and every socioeconomic aspect of it. And when I talk about teachers, I also mean head teachers included. So we gave it some thought at VVOB, and we've decided to start the School Links Global Online Network for Teachers in Climate Education. It is a web-based application, with a very social media-like interface that can be accessed through www.schoollinks.org. So what is School Links exactly? Well, it is a fun and exciting interactive online tool where secondary school teachers get the opportunity to access scientifically correct information about climate change, where they can access documented examples of climate change teaching activities across the curriculum, where they get a platform to share their knowledge on climate change and climate education with, and learn from teachers in other countries through global connections, where they can use school climate projects as valuable teaching and learning resources. So School Links is basically a safe online space for teachers to learn about climate change education, and where, most importantly, where inclusion of different perspectives is being encouraged and respected. So in a nutshell, School Links has 4 pillars. It is backed by science. It is inspired by teachers and teaching material. It is connected to the world, and it is enriched with school projects. So how do we support all these teachers on this global online network? Well, first, we post. Yeah, I say post because it's very social media-like. We post scientifically correct information about topics related to climate change as resource and inspiration for the teachers to enhance their own climate knowledge, climate literacy. You can see an example of such a post from the platform. Second, we do active coaching and moderation to help the moderation of the conversations on the platform to help teachers spark their creativity and enable them to come up with valuable, meaningful ideas to strengthen their climate teaching practices. Third, we provide valuable teaching resources and access to workshops, seminars, trainings, online courses, and other learning events for educators. And last but not the least, we provide small financial support, sometimes in the form of material, to teachers who wish to collaborate on a climate project and then come to the platform and share their teaching and learning experiences there with their peers. So this is a form of supporting project-based learning. And one of the examples is we made digital weather stations available for schools, for teachers who wish to use it in science, geography, or even other subjects. All right, so as School Links, I know teachers have a lot on their plate already. School Links should not be seen as a new extra initiative for teachers to join, but rather as a useful tool to sustain outcomes from other climate education initiatives. A good example of this can be found in South Africa with the Keep It Cool project. That project has now ended, but what we see is that many of the Keep It Cool schools have now have their teachers join the School Links platform to continue and improve what they've started then. And last week, I had the privilege to visit some of these schools and speak with some of the teachers. And I would like to share with you what some of them had to say about the platform. So there should be a video playing now, and excuse me for the quality.
Mrs. Pindi Lemema from Buhlebemfundo Secondary School, that is KZN, South Africa, and I'm teaching natural sciences and physical sciences. What I can say is that even for the word S school means a lot to me because I think S is for the school, and then as I'm a teacher involved with the learners, I think I can able to use the information I'm gaining from the platform just to pass it to my learners and also to help in the teaching of natural sciences and physical sciences. And also that is where I can able to link whatever I'm learning into my teaching of the subjects. And I think that is helping me a lot. And also through the platform, I'm gaining a lot of information, like the gardening team. It is whereby I can able to learn more about how other people they are doing in their own countries, like they tackling the issue of insects and also something like that on how to use different methods just to tackle those things. I think that is helping me a lot.
Plant a tree, recycle waste, go green. Plant more trees, recycle waste, clean our sea, create a safe forest, disease free, the planet that we call.
Okay, I'm Mr. Here for more than 10 years in the school. I'm a coordinator for Buhlebemfundo Environmental Club. The S School link, it's like a connection. It serves a connection whereby we can connect with other teachers. You know, by the connection, I mean that we can interact, we can share ideas, we can share whatever, even like because it connects even to other countries. We can share ideas on how to on different, like using a different perspective on how to mitigate climate change, you know, and how to do other projects, you know. For example, as we are doing gardening, we can share ideas on how to do it using the platform.
Hello and good day. My name is Mr. MG Pillay, and I'm currently at Dr. A.D. Lazo Secondary, where I was the lead teacher for this program by KICC on the Veg Garden Project. At the moment, I'm now at a new school called Crystal Point in Phoenix, and I hope to be taking the project there as well. By encouraging learners to get involved in garden projects, each of them see that they can provide for themselves sustainable means of providing food for their homes. Opposite our school, there are informal settlements where people are indigent and they do not have the necessary. We are able to provide some for some of the most needy. In teaching the learners to plant, they are then encouraged to realize that every plant matters on this in this earth of ours, because if they plant, they are able to reduce the carbon impact that we are causing really as a major factor in climate change. With regards to the S School Links platform, I think it is an ideal platform for us as teachers globally. We can share ideas about projects that we are running at school. We can request support from people that are already on other projects in other countries. We can share ideas and see whether some of the ideas that are working in some countries can be then used in our country. And obviously we can provide solutions to those teachers that are experiencing problems if we are able to, and we can seek support. So basically communication, support, and taking this climate change education to another level.
All right. It was really inspirational speaking with these teachers and engaging with them and their students. I would like to end my presentation by saying that this platform is open to all secondary school teachers, and in the near future, we may even open it up to other educational levels. It is free, it is voluntary, and it supports self-paced learning. So please help spread the word. I know there are some teachers joining today as well, so that's it's very nice to know. So yeah, spread the word, and we hope we can welcome more teachers on the platform, because the more teachers we can support, the greater the impact that we can create.
2 questions. How many teachers do you have on the platform currently?
Right now, a little over 250.
Okay, so kind of still
We are
growing.
growing.
And what about language?
Yeah, so the language on the platform is English, but if that is a barrier, include your colleague, your English teaching colleague, and make it a real school collaboration as well.
That sounds almost too easy. Okay, thank you very much, Asmita. To end this session, and then we move to the last thing. Lainey, what do you see emerge here from this session in terms of supporting teachers to become those climate change agents?
So thank you for the question. I saw sort of from all of the presentations, I think 3 elements really stood out to me: collaboration, agency, and conditions. So creating spaces for teachers to collaborate, to learn together, to grow together, to share resources, giving them the agency to be able to do so, and also then creating the conditions to bring what they have learned into the classroom in a effective, sustainable way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lainey, Asmita. Thank you very much, Shanu, and also merci à Ablé, Dia, Françoise, et bien sûr, Ngozefal. Thank you very much. Good. Running a bit over time. This brings us to the end of today. And in the meantime, on the Mentimeter, I ask you again, like, what is your insights from this session? And I ask, I want to ask Liana Hohenweg to join me here. Liana is the director from Enable for the expertise on thematic and sectorial expertise, sectoral and thematic expertise. Doesn't matter. Okay, good. Thank you very much. It's already kind of almost 5:45. To kind of a bit of word of thank, but also because we are in your premises, and
you want me to open them?
They are not opened yet.
Yeah, they are.
They are.
Yeah, they have been, yeah. By the minister. Yeah. Yeah, but go ahead. What did you want me to do?
Well, kind of. Maybe not open the premises because we are already here this afternoon, but more like
just so that we are aligned. Yeah,
we are here at the premises of Enable, so it's kind of, we're very grateful to be here, very happy to be here, and maybe you kind of just want to say a bit how you are connected to educate.be, what your role is, and well, just kind of as a closing of today, and so maybe also give 1 or 2 words what you think, like, what I took from today is this.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. That makes it very clear, and I can do that. So that's okay. I won't take too long because I know we are over time. But I did want to, first of all, thank the organizers and give them a really big hand of applause because they did a wonderful job. It's the first hybrid Educate conference. And it's challenging to bring people in the room, to connect with people online. But I think it worked out very well. And the content of the conference did not suffer. It was very high quality. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, then we are here at Enable just to make the connection, but you will learn so much more tomorrow. We have 3 or 4 sessions. I got confused because I saw B, C, D, but I didn't find A.
That's this one. That was by.
Okay, so tomorrow, yeah, they're rudimentary things, and when you're here with your head in the clouds, those things don't make sense any longer. So okay, that makes sense now, tomorrow you'll have 3 very inspiring sessions in which Enable will also be part and parcels of these of the content. So you'll find out. But what we do is we implement Belgian development. Yeah, I don't want to say aid, but it's somehow still connected to that. What we do is we facilitate projects and programs in 14 partner countries of the Belgian development. And parts of that is education. For us today was also very challenging because we talked about de-siloing. And I see my colleagues from the education department and I see my colleagues from the environmental department, and they are still different. But it's good that they today were brought in the same room and that they can talk about how to integrate climate in education, but also how to integrate education into climate. So today was for me, in that sense, a brilliant example of how it should be done. Wrapping up the day very quickly, I think what I saw was that we came from a broader perspective of where we were challenged. First of all, the urgency was emphasized during the openings by the 3 directors. And then we got this challenging keynote speech that sort of provoked us not to see climate and education as separate things or add-on things or things that should mirror the reality of today, but really provoked us to think ahead. And what I found striking is she talked about the future. She mentioned 150 ways to see the future, but what I realized after the later sessions, or session A probably, is that the future is actually now. You see that people that are living the reality of climate change, and that's not really us yet. We are getting there. We are starting to understand that we are facing issues that we need to deal with, but the reality of actually living climate change, we see that in our partner countries. Senegal is a very good example. South Africa has been a very good example. So we can actually learn a lot from the practices that have been shared with us today to mitigate the challenges that we are going to face in the not too far future. In that sense, I am of the opinion that today was very successful. Thank you also, Ruben, for your excellent facilitation. Again, we know you very well, but you've done an excellent job in bringing everything together. And thank you, participants, for sharing your insights via the Mentimeter. For me, that also gave huge insight in what we can be doing in the future. I don't want to go any further because there's still tomorrow. Yeah. And I'll join online. I'm working from home. I like my conferences to be hybrid. I can participate in person and online, but I'll see you all online tomorrow for another exciting afternoon of inspiration on education and climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liana. Thank you very much. And yes, indeed, tomorrow, green schools, climate justice, resilience, and the perspective of the youth. Not that unimportant, talking about education. Thank you very much for today. See you tomorrow, same time, 1 o'clock, we'll be starting again.